In our last journey, we reached a staggering conclusion. God's sovereignty is so absolute that Satan himself becomes an instrument in his divine orchestra. And while this truth offers a profound sense of cosmic order for the honest heart, it doesn't quiet every storm. In fact, it gives rise to a far more personal, more painful question, a question that remains unanswered. If God is the master strategist who sees all ends from the beginning, then why was the opening move of the game a permitted tragedy? We speak of the Garden of Eden, a world untouched by decay, a sanctuary of perfect innocence. Why was this hallowed ground not sealed off from the encroaching darkness? Why were the fallen angels whose rebellion had already stained the heavens allowed to cast their long cold shadow upon humanity's dawn, before the first sin was ever conceived in the hearts of Adam and Eve? Why didn't God simply intervene? Why not prevent the fall before it could even begin? The answer, the true reason for this divine allowance, is not etched into the main tablets of our history. It is a secret whispered through the ages, preserved in the fragile pages of an apocryphal text, a lost chapter of Genesis known as the Book of Jubilees. This ancient scroll details a terrifying cosmic drama that unfolded before the serpent ever uttered a word. It holds the key to understanding the true role of the fallen angels and the hidden strategy of Satan. What we are about to uncover is not just an explanation. It is a revelation that will reframe everything you thought you knew about why that first battle was allowed to be lost and why even now God cannot simply kill his greatest adversary. I know the question burning in your mind right now, a question born of a healthy and necessary discernment. The Book of Jubilees, what is that? And more importantly, why should we listen to it? This is a legitimate and vital question. So let me be perfectly clear. The Book of Jubilees is an ancient Jewish text written sometime during the Second Temple period, around the 2nd century BC. It was so revered for its detailed retelling of the events from creation to Moses that it earned the nickname Little Genesis. Now, to address the most critical point for the vast majority of Western Christian and Jewish traditions, the Book of Jubilees is not part of the official biblical canon. It is not a replacement for Scripture, and we are not presenting it as such. However, it is crucial to understand that this was not some obscure fringe document. For centuries, it was a profoundly influential text, so much so that the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, one of the oldest Christian communions in the world, has always included it as part of their official canon. This fact alone tells us we are dealing with a work of serious historical and theological weight. So why are we turning to it today? Think of it this way: the Holy Bible is the unshakable, divinely inspired house of truth. The Book of Jubilees is not a new room, nor does it alter the foundation of that house. Instead, it is an ancient dust-covered window, a window that has been overlooked by many, but one that offers a unique perspective. By looking through this window, we get an unparalleled glimpse into the ancient mindset. We can see how our spiritual ancestors grappled with the very same difficult questions we face today. We are looking through their eyes to understand the narrative that shaped their world. We are not here to add to the canon. We are here to add context. And the context this forgotten window provides is so explosive, so illuminating, that it will forever change your understanding of the cosmic war that preceded our own. So I invite you to step with us to that window. The view from here is breathtaking. To understand the secret hidden in the garden, we must first look beyond its walls to a time before the serpent, to a tragedy that began not on earth, but in the heavens. Before humanity learned the sting of betrayal, a betrayal of cosmic proportions was already unfolding. The Book of Jubilees, along with other ancient texts like the Book of Enoch, introduces us to a specific and powerful class of celestial beings, the Watchers. Their name itself reveals their purpose. They were the sentinels of heaven, the holy guardians assigned a sacred mission by God himself. Their task was to watch over the fledgling human race, to guide, protect, and instruct humanity in the ways of righteousness and divine order. Imagine their glory, pure spirits bathed in the light of God's presence, dispatched to be the benevolent shepherds of a new creation. Theirs was a mission of unparalleled honor, a testament to the trust God placed in them. But as they watched from their celestial perch, their divine focus began to stray. Their gaze fell upon the daughters of men, and they saw that they were beautiful. What began as admiration curdled into something far more sinister: lust. An unholy desire took root in their hearts, a longing that stood in direct opposition to their sacred duty. According to the text, 200 of these watchers, led by their chief, a powerful angel named Samyaza, gathered on the summit of Mount Hermon. There they made a pact. They bound themselves together by a mutual oath, a terrible curse upon themselves should any of them turn back. They swore a vow not to uphold their mission, but to abandon it. They sealed a covenant to descend from their heavenly station and take the daughters of men as wives, to defile themselves with mortal flesh and break the sacred boundary between heaven and earth. In that moment on that mountain, these guardians became transgressors. The shepherds decided to devour the flock. This was the first great breach, the first act in a drama of corruption that would soon spill down from the heavens and drown the world in a tide of darkness. They were the first fallen angels, and their descent was just the beginning. The betrayal of the Watchers was not merely a crime of passion. It was a deliberate act of cosmic sabotage. Their descent was not just a fall from grace, but an invasion. They came to earth bearing gifts poisoned with forbidden knowledge, secrets of heaven that humanity was never meant to possess at this stage of its development. These were not random acts of corruption. This was a systematic unraveling of the divine order. The text named one watcher in particular as a chief architect of this new age of ruin: Azazel. His name would become synonymous with corruption. It was Azazel who taught mankind the art of war. He showed them how to mine the earth, not for its beauty, but for its metals: iron for swords and daggers, brass for shields and breastplates. He armed humanity for bloodshed, introducing a violence that had been entirely alien to creation. The peace of the world was shattered by the clang of newly forged weapons. But the corruption was far more insidious than just warfare. Azazel also taught women the art of deception through cosmetics, how to apply kohl to their eyes and paint to their faces, not for beauty, but for seduction and vanity. Other watchers revealed the secrets of sorcery, the casting of spells, the cutting of roots for magical enchantments, and the interpretation of signs in the heavens, twisting astronomy into astrology. They taught humanity how to call upon powers they did not understand, opening doorways to spiritual realms that should have remained sealed. This was a calculated seeding of chaos. Every piece of forbidden knowledge was designed to sever humanity's dependence on God and foster a reliance on power, vanity, and arcane secrets. They were not just corrupting individuals. They were poisoning the very wellspring of human culture. The world was being systematically remade in their own rebellious image, and a new terrible form of evil was being sown into the very fabric of the earth. The unholy union between the Watchers and human women produced a monstrous and terrifying result. From these forbidden unions, a new race was born onto the earth, a race of giants known in the scriptures as the Nephilim. They were hybrids, beings who belonged neither to heaven nor to earth, possessing the supernatural strength of their angelic fathers and the carnal appetites of their human mothers, magnified to a horrifying degree. These were not gentle giants. They were creatures of immense waste and insatiable hunger. The Book of Enoch describes them consuming all the acquisitions of men. When the food of humanity was no longer enough to satisfy their ravenous appetites, they turned on their creators. The Nephilim began to devour mankind. The world descended into a blood-soaked nightmare of violence and cannibalism. They consumed birds, beasts, reptiles, and fish, and then in a final act of abomination, they began to drink the blood of one another. The earth cried out under the weight of this unprecedented chaos. This was a world spiraling into total self-destruction, an anarchy so complete that it threatened to erase God's creation entirely. And it is within this crucible of absolute horror that a central figure of malice emerges, a coordinating intelligence behind the escalating evil. The Book of Jubilees gives him a name, Mastema. The name itself means hatred or hostility. He is the chief of the spirits, the prince of enmity. This is the entity that the scriptures would later identify as Satan, the great adversary. Mastema was not merely one of the Watchers. He was their leader in this grand project of corruption. He was the commander of this terrestrial hell, the ultimate orchestrator of the world's descent into madness. The chaos was not random, it had a general, and his name was Mastema, the Lord of Hatred, the future accuser of mankind. Faced with a world drowning in its own blood, a creation so utterly corrupted that it bore no resemblance to his original design, God decreed a cleansing. A great flood would wash the earth clean of the violence of the Nephilim and the defilement of the Watchers. The judgment was set. The giants would be destroyed, and the Watchers would be bound in chains in the abyss until the final day. This should have been the end of the story, a complete reset. But then something truly unbelievable happens. The Book of Jubilees describes a moment that is both shocking and deeply unsettling. As the angels of God begin to bind all of the evil spirits, the disembodied malevolent souls of the dead Nephilim, their chief Mastema steps forward. He does not fight, he does not rebel against the judgment. Instead, he approaches the presence of God with a formal petition, a legal request. He acknowledges God's righteous judgment, but makes an appeal. Mastema argues that if all the evil spirits are bound, he will be left with no one to command, no instruments to carry out his will. And what is his will? He states it plainly: to corrupt, to lead astray, and to destroy the children of men. And so he asks God to let him retain a portion of his demonic forces, not all of them. He asks for 1/10. He petitions God for permission to keep 1/10 of the demons under his command for the specific stated purpose of tempting and testing humanity throughout its history. And here's is the most staggering detail in the entire account. God grants his request. The text states that God allowed 1/10 of the spirits to remain with Mastema, while the other 9/10 were condemned to the place of judgment. This was not a backroom deal. This was a formal divine decree. The very architect of humanity's ruin was given a sanctioned, albeit limited, army of demons and an officially permitted mandate to continue his work of temptation. The stage was now set for the next act in the human drama, with evil not just existing, but existing by divine permission. Let us pause here and let the full weight of this revelation settle. The picture is now complete, and it is far more terrifying than we imagined. We have a world already poisoned by the forbidden knowledge of the fallen angels. We have a planet ravaged by the violence of their hybrid offspring. And now we have the chief of all evil, Satan himself, not only evading immediate destruction, but being formally permitted to retain an army of demons for the express purpose of testing mankind. All of this, the entire horrifying prelude, takes place before he even approaches Adam and Eve in their pristine sanctuary. So now the question returns, but this time with an almost unbearable intensity. Why, seeing the utter devastation caused by the first wave of rebellion, would God allow this? Why, with full knowledge of his malicious intent, would God permit Satan and his remaining forces to approach his most beloved, innocent creation? Why did God not simply annihilate him and every last vestige of his evil right then and there? Why cannot God just kill Satan and the fallen angels to protect his own children from a battle they are clearly not equipped to fight? Was this a failure in the divine plan? A catastrophic miscalculation? Or does it point to something else entirely? A purpose so profound, so beyond our comprehension, that it required the existence of evil to be woven into the very fabric of our story from the beginning. We are now standing at the precipice of the ultimate theological mystery, staring into the abyss of divine silence, demanding an answer. The answer to this agonizing silence is perhaps the most profound and difficult truth in all of theology. What if the presence of evil, the permission granted to Satan, was not a bug in the system? What if it was a feature? This is the great reversal, the ultimate reframe of the entire story. The fall of man was not an unforeseen accident that sent God scrambling for a backup plan. It was an anticipated, even necessary component of a far grander design. God did not kill Satan and the fallen angels because he needed a genuine, powerful, and terrifying alternative to himself to exist in creation. Why? Because of the one thing he values above perfect, robotic obedience: freely chosen love. Think of it. What is the value of loyalty if there is no opportunity for betrayal? What is the virtue of faith if the possibility of doubt is non-existent? A love that is not chosen from a field of legitimate alternatives is not love at all. It is merely compliance. An allegiance that cannot be tested is not allegiance. It is a pre-programmed command. For Adam and Eve's love for God to be real, for their obedience to have meaning, for their relationship to be one of conscious choice rather than enforced servitude, the option to reject him had to be real. It had to be tangible, seductive, and powerful. Satan and his permitted army of tempters were not a mistake in God's plan. They were the crucible. They were the very instrument required to make the test of free will authentic. They provided the shadow that gave substance to the light. God was not interested in creating a paradise of puppets. He was building a kingdom of sons and daughters who would choose him, not because there was no other option, but because even in the face of a terrifyingly real alternative, they would declare that he alone is worthy. The test had to be real for the love to be true. Let us expand our perspective beyond the Garden of Eden and envision the entire cosmos as a great divine courtroom. God does not sit on the throne merely as a creator, but as the supreme judge and the universal king. Every action he takes is not just an exercise of power, but a display of his character before an audience of all created beings, angels, principalities, and powers, both loyal and fallen. Now imagine if this king, upon the first sign of rebellion from Lucifer, had acted as a tyrant. Imagine if he had instantly annihilated Satan and his followers with a single thought. The rebellion would have been crushed, yes. But what message would that have sent to the rest of the heavenly host? The resulting obedience would not have been born from a love of righteousness or a deep reverence for God's perfect justice. It would have been born from fear. The rest of creation would serve him not because he is good, but because he is lethally intolerant of dissent. They would fall in line not out of adoration, but out of a terrified sense of self-preservation. That is the rule of a despot, not the reign of a righteous king. A truly just ruler does not silence opposition through sheer force. He allows the case to be made, the evidence to be presented, and the rebellion to fully reveal its own hideous, self-destructive nature. By allowing Satan to exist, by permitting him to execute his flawed and hateful strategy, God is building a legal case for the ages. He is demonstrating to the entire universe for all of eternity that his ways are not only more powerful, but they are infinitely more just, more loving, and more righteous. The final judgment will not just be a sentencing, it will be the ultimate public vindication of God's perfect character, a verdict that every knee in heaven and on earth will have to acknowledge as perfectly and unimpeachably fair. Here we arrive at the very heart of the divine strategy, the masterstroke that transforms this cosmic tragedy into the greatest love story ever told. God, in his perfect foreknowledge, knew that the first Adam would fail the test in the garden. He knew that humanity, given a choice, would choose disobedience. But this foreknowledge was not a cause for despair. It was the setup for a solution so profound, it would redeem not just the failure, but the very nature of the test itself. The failure of the first Adam was a necessary precondition for the triumph of the second Adam, Jesus Christ. The great salvation plan was never just about forgiving a mistake. It was about a perfect substitution. For there to be a substitute, there first had to be a failure to substitute for. For a price to be paid, there first had to be a debt incurred. For a victory to be won, there first had to be a battle that was lost. The existence and actions of Satan in the garden were not merely to test the first Adam. They were to set the stage for the glory of the second. Jesus couldn't just be a teacher or a prophet. To fulfill the plan, he had to live the life Adam failed to live, a life of perfect obedience in the face of real temptation. He then had to die the death Adam deserved. The shadow of Adam's failure is what gives the light of Christ's victory its breathtaking brilliance. Without the tragic story of the first Adam's fall, the glorious story of the second Adam's redemption would lose its context and its power. The serpent's apparent victory in the garden was in reality the first note in a divine symphony that would ultimately climax at the cross, revealing a depth of God's love and a commitment to his creation that would have otherwise remained hidden. The first failure was a necessary prelude to the final perfect salvation. So now we can finally see the board with the eyes of the chess master. Every move the enemy has ever made has been anticipated, countered, and ultimately co-opted. Satan, the great adversary, in his blind arrogance and searing hatred, believes he is fighting a war against God. But the staggering truth is that he has been demoted. He is no longer a rival, he is a tool. He is an unwitting pawn on God's cosmic chessboard, and every move he makes to disrupt the divine plan only serves to advance it. When he whispered lies in the Garden of Eden, he thought he was ending God's dream for humanity. In reality, he was setting the stage for the coming of the Redeemer. When he tempted Jesus in the wilderness, offering him the kingdoms of the world, he thought he was exposing a weakness. In reality, he was validating the sinless perfection of the only one worthy to be our sacrifice. And in his ultimate crowning achievement of malice, when he entered the heart of Judas and drove the nails into the hands of Christ at the cross, he believed he had finally won. He thought he had extinguished the light of the world. But in that very act, he was inadvertently fulfilling the ancient prophecies. He was ensuring the payment for all sin. He was making the resurrection possible. The cross was not Satan's victory, it was God's checkmate. This is the definition of absolute sovereignty. It is a power so complete, so total, that it doesn't need to eliminate its opposition. It absorbs it, it redirects it. It makes the very actions of its greatest enemy the instruments of its own inevitable and glorious victory. The war was over before it began because the king was playing both sides of the board. So what does all of this mean for you? What does this grand cosmic narrative of fallen angels, ancient texts, and divine strategy have to do with your life, your pain, your struggles right now? It means everything. It means that the God you serve is never reactive. He is never caught by surprise. He is never forced to improvise a solution to the chaos in the world or in your own heart. When you look at the story of your life, you often see it from underneath, like looking at the backside of a grand tapestry. All you can see are the tangled knots, the chaotic threads, the confusing patterns, and the dark, messy strings that seem to have no purpose. You see the thread of a painful loss, the knot of a betrayal, the dark string of a personal failure or a season of profound doubt. From your perspective, it looks like a meaningless collection of broken pieces. But this truth reminds us that there is a master weaver. From his perspective, above the tapestry, he sees the complete picture. He is actively, intentionally weaving every single thread, even the darkest, most painful ones, into a breathtaking masterpiece you cannot yet comprehend. That thread of suffering is being woven into a pattern of endurance. That knot of failure is being used to create a texture of humility and grace. That dark string of loneliness is being transformed into a deep color of compassion for others. Your pain is not pointless. Your struggles are not wasted. He is taking the very things the enemy intended for your destruction and is weaving them into the story of your redemption. He did it with the fall of humanity. He did it at the cross, and he is doing it right now with the broken pieces of your life. One day you will see the tapestry from his side, and you will stand in speechless awe at the beauty he has created from the chaos you endured. Trust the weaver. So we return for the last time to our central question: why cannot God just kill Satan? And now the answer is clear. It is not because he lacks the power, it is because his plan is infinitely more brilliant than simple annihilation. In summary, he does not destroy his enemy because the temporary existence of Satan and the fallen angels serves a far more glorious purpose. It validates the reality of free will. It demonstrates the unimpeachable justice of his character before the entire universe. And most importantly, it sets the stage for the ultimate display of his redemptive love through Jesus Christ. God's victory isn't about erasing evil, but about conquering it in a way that magnifies his own glory for all eternity. If this deeper perspective, drawn from the forgotten whispers of the Book of Jubilees and the grand tapestry of the divine plan, has illuminated something new and powerful for your faith, then we invite you to be part of spreading this message. Please click the like button to signal that this truth has resonated with you, and share this video with someone who may be wrestling with these same profound questions. But our conversation doesn't end here. We want to hear from you. In the comments below, please share your thoughts on this challenging question. Does knowing that God can use evil for his good purposes bring you more comfort or more questions? Your personal insights and honest reflections enrich this entire community. Let's engage with this truth together. Finally, if you desire to continue exploring the unseen spiritual realities that shape our world, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell. Because while we have focused on the strategist of darkness, our next journey will turn to the commander of the light. We will uncover the story of the great Archangel Michael and his ongoing battle against the very principalities and powers we have discussed today. You won't want to miss the next chapter in this cosmic war. Thank you for joining us on this profound journey. May God bless you and keep you until we meet again.